Have you ever walked past a harbour and seen row upon row of boats docked, ropes creak softly against timber posts, and each boat settles into its familiar berth, as if it's always belonged there? Docked, it knows exactly what the day will be, the same gulls circling, the same rhythm of tides, the same low slap of water against the hull. Predictable, contained, the harbour is a cradle built from stone and habit. It's a place where the world is reduced to a manageable size. And most of our lives are spent in various harbours. We build them carefully out of routines, beliefs, careers, relationships, and the small customs that make up each day. And they feel solid. Within their walls, we know who we're supposed to be. The compass is steady, the map is drawn, even if we complain about how narrow the space feels. There's comfort in its boundaries. Yet every harbour, no matter how well constructed, faces outwards. Beyond the harbour wall lies a different kind of water, deeper, darker, less obedient. Out there the swell gathers itself, without asking permission. Wind ignores schedules. Currents do not respect plans. The open sea represents everything we cannot control. And that's precisely why it calls to us. Change begins when we feel restless in the dock. Perhaps it arrives as a thought that will not stay quiet. Perhaps as a feeling that the life we are living, though safe, has become too small. We look at the flags waving along the harbour walls and we sense, faintly at first, that they are not just decoration. They are signals, reminders that the world is larger than our routines. They point to a vastness that we never venture into. To remain docked forever is to confuse safety with living. But leaving is not simple. The harbour has taught us its language. We understand its rules, we know how to move within its limits. And to sail out means surrendering certainty, trading the familiar creak of the mooring lines for the less stable voice of the wind. The deeper water promises freedom. However, it also brings discomfort. Swell lifts and drops the bow, horizons tilt, and familiar landmarks disappear behind us. Moving beyond current thinking feels just like that first moment of departure. Our established ideas, our sturdy docks, they hold us in place and prevent drift. They keep us from getting lost, yet they also become prisons, disguised as protection. We begin to mistake repetition for truth, just because things are so familiar. The mind, like a boat, becomes accustomed to its moorings. It forgets it was designed for motion. Out beyond the harbour walls, the sea is different. There is more space than structure. Problems cannot be solved by clinging to the posts we have always used. Old maps become unreliable. We must learn to read the sky, to feel the changing temperament of the water beneath us. New thinking requires that same kind of attention, less certainty, and more curiosity. Calmness, surprisingly, is not found only in sheltered places. There are days on the open sea when the water smooths itself to glass and the boat moves with effortless grace. In those moments, we discover a tranquility deeper than the one offered by the harbour. It's a calm born not of limitation, but of possibility. We realise that freedom has its own form of peace, one that comes from trust and not control. But getting there demands courage. Every worthwhile change begins with casting off. We loosen the ropes of old assumptions. We push away from the comfortable pier of how things have always been done. And we risk looking foolish or uncertain or unprepared. And the first stretch of water outside the harbour is often choppy with doubt. We glance back instinctively. We are tempted to return to the familiar. Yet something in us keeps the bow pointed outward. Beyond the harbour is where imagination lives, Within the walls, creativity becomes practical and polite. Outside them, it becomes wild again. New ideas require open water because they need room to maneuver. A small boat cannot discover its strength while tied to the dock. Likewise, a life cannot discover its depth while anchored to habits that no longer serve it. To move beyond current thinking is not to reject everything we have known. The harbour is not an enemy. It taught us seamanship, it gave us a place to begin, but beginnings are not meant to last forever. At some point, the sailor must trust the vessel, trust the weather, and trust the vastness that waits. Flags wave along the shoreline as we go, small bright witnesses to our departure. From a distance they blur into streaks of colour, reminders that there will always be places to return to if we choose. The harbour remains steady and patient, but it's no longer the centre of the world. It becomes instead a reference point, a memory of who we were before we dared to grow. Change is simply navigation under new skies. Often we imagine that transformation must be dramatic, a storm that tears everything apart. But in truth, it's more frequently a quiet decision to raise the sail and feel what happens next. The boat leans into the breeze, the water begins to move beneath us. What felt frightening a moment ago becomes exhilarating. We discover capacities that we didn't know we possessed. The water teaches us humility. It reminds us that we are small within a large and intricate world, but it also teaches confidence, for each mile travelled expands our sense of what's possible. Problems that once seemed enormous shrink against the scale of the horizon. We learn to adjust, to improvise, to think in ways the harbour never required. There is freedom in not knowing exactly how the day will unfold. Beyond the harbour, time behaves differently. Without rigid schedules and fixed expectations, moments open like wide channels. We become more attentive, more alive to subtle shifts of wind and light. We stop asking only, is this safe? And begin asking, is this true? Is this calling me forward? Moving beyond current thinking is an act of faith, faith that we can be more. The open sea does not guarantee success, but it guarantees growth. And yet, even as we travel further out, the harbour remains part of our story. At times, we can return, changed by distance and experience. We will see the dock with new eyes, understanding both their value and their limits. Perhaps we'll rest there for a season, repairing sails, sharing tales, preparing again for departure. A good harbour does not trap a vessel, it equips it. And life moves in this rhythm, leaving and returning, safety and risk, shelter and openness. Wisdom lies in knowing when to stay and when to sail. So the boat heads outward, past the last protective wall, into a widening field of blue. The swell lifts it gently, and ahead stretches space, unmeasured, unpromised, alive with potential. The wind fills the canvas, and the craft answers, eager at last to become what it was built to be. Beyond the harbour walls, the rest of the story. See you next time.